when I look back now, I'm like, I remember bringing those experiences of, I would say, gender difficulty in those kind of earlier years.
People have just spent a lot of their lives not being able to find the words and look their family in the eye and actually tell them who they are. I'll speak from my experience as a queer South Asian. I think for people like me and myself, you have this constant chatter at the back of your head. There's just so much shame associated when you're not conforming. And then that's the shame that I have carried and has led to the detriment of my mental health. And you're kind of stuck because you're always conditioned to believe that your family is your anchor.
Community care is so fundamental to kind of well-being, actually, because we are actually finally able to be in spaces where our experiences are mirrored and where we feel a sense of belonging.
I live with complex PTSD. Those moments when I am not dysregulated are just so precious, where as you say, my nervous system is not on an overdrive to constantly, explain a lot of things. When I joined my current organization, out of no one's doing, I still remember, interacting with my line manager, a white cis heterosexual man. Still, my tongue would stutter at the usage of the pronouns of my partner.
What I generally say to kind of people, particularly sort of queer leaders in the workplace, is identify your values. If your values are getting reflected in your workplace, if those values are there, then there's going to be greater ability or greater chances of you being able to be vulnerable actually in that space. I think we need to talk about ambition more as a society. I think, again, we need to unpack it, we need to examine it, we need to understand the trauma sometimes that's really at the root of a lot of sort of ambition.
A lot of us try to overcompensate for our kind of core beliefs coming up. So we're working way more hours and working really hard to kind of have to prove a point. And we may see it as proving a point to an organization or a line manager, but actually we're proving a point to ourselves somewhere. So I think a lot of us who bring it back in terms of a queer leader, some of us who've actually gone through a journey of healing, we can present ambition, I believe, in a more positive way in your workspace so that ambition can become collective as opposed to individual.
I think, again, as queer leaders, there is that added responsibility, particularly with our community, to think about sort of that safeguarding element and the kind of behaviours we as queer leaders need to role model. So part of that is about are we owning vulnerability?
Because you're kind of thriving even when you're dealing with a very low period in your life. Even though I may be having a very tough day at work or having a difficult time in my relationship, if I can get to these things that actually help me feel nourished, that is, again, I think, evidence of the fact that I'm perhaps thriving. That helps me feel grounded, actually, because it points to the fact that at some point in time, I was feeling all of these sort of things, or even if I was calmer, clearly the list of things that nourished me were from a time where I felt good, that I could actually identify a list of things that I like doing.
So one really good kind of hack, I guess, in the moment that we can use is about first tuning into our bodies, so identifying whether we are in a kind of fight-flight place. So when our nervous system is triggered into fight-flight, it's triggering a sympathetic nervous system. And one of the easiest kind of ways to actually, again, regulate or ground ourselves, to calm ourselves in that moment, is a breath work that's called the 4-2-6. And this allows us to kind of actually trigger what's called our parasympathetic nervous system. So maybe when we're in a kind of what we call our kind of freeze states, or our kind of dissociative states, or low mood, or flat, empty kind of feeling states, one, again, really simple trick is to, instead of kind of calming our nervous system, we actually need to activate. We need to kind of get energy back into our nervous system. And a really easy method is cold water on our face. That just helps us to kind of re-engage with our senses in the moment.